Hey guys, we've been making these videos for our How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist for more than 12 years about all sorts of topics. In that time we've repeated lots and lots of times that these are just observations, these videos are just observations, things that we've noticed are effective in a positive way and things that are perhaps have negative results, and based on that these are our observations. We've also repeated lots and lots of times that, of course, in Japan, people can do whatever they want to do, however they want to do it, you know, obviously. And these videos are just hopefully, you know, our thinking is if one person gets some little benefit out of it, either way, then it was worth making. So, having said that, what triggered this video is two things happened this week. One was that video we made recently about the old man next door going off. If you haven't seen that yet, check it out. Angry man says something or something. There was a few comments on that one, and one of them was from a guy that said, now I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of, you know, if that was him, he would just not listen to the guy and walk away, or tell him that he wasn't going to listen to him, you know, talk to him in a disrespectful way, and when he was ready to talk to him respectfully, then he'd listen to him. Something like that, I'm paraphrasing. That's the general idea, that he wouldn't accept the aggression from this old dude, that he'd demand the old dude treat him more politely or he wouldn't listen to him, right? Which is fair enough reaction. It's a fair enough reaction. It's not the strategy I employed, but again, you know, everybody has their own way of doing things, don't they? Whether it's in Japan or any other country, everybody has their own way of doing things. And they get different results for what they do. So of course, you know, he's entitled to do things however he wants to do them. The other thing that triggered this video was, I got an email just today. An associate of mine owns a Cessna 172, and he's invited me to fly it a few times in the past, and it sort of works rather well. I think he likes me to fly it, and he likes to sit there and do the radio and the navigating and stuff like that. Works rather well, and I'm wrapped because I get to fly an aeroplane. So he contacted me this week and said, let's go flying. So there's a video coming about that shortly, because that's tomorrow. So we're gonna go flying. And then he said to me, you know, let's meet at the airport at 8:30. And I said, well, I've got to take my kid to work, and to school, not to work. Down the coal mine. No, she's not working down the coal mine. I'm going to take her to school. And then I've got to go to the airport. And I said, I might not be there by 8:30, but I'll do my best. And he wrote back and said some more stuff, and then said again, you know, 8:30, don't be late, right? And there was he actually had a few things in that email. He was telling me some stuff. Now, you know, in Australia, we tend to be a bit about everybody being sort of equal. You know, that's sort of the culture I grew up in. And even people that are senior to you, as far as, you know, flying instructors and things like that, we tend to speak to each other in a fairly sort of an equal sort of manner. So that's what I'm used to. And when it comes to flying, I've actually got a bit more experience than he has. So when we're actually flying the aeroplane, you know, it's generally accepted that I'm sort of senior, usually, to in what we're doing, even though it's his aeroplane. I'm the pilot in command, and that tends to be the way that tends to go. However, this email was just basically giving me a list of things in a very sort of a dictatorial sort of way. You know, this is what we're going to do, and this is what you're going to do, and this, and this, and 8:30, don't be late. Right. Now, as with that video with the old man, I explained what went through my head and what my natural reactions were to that old man's behaviour, and it was a bit similar to this email. My natural reaction to this email was, oh, fuck off, you know? I told you I might not be able to be there by 8:30. That was my feeling, right? And just the general tone of this telling me thing, you know, and you know, the best thing to do if you can in a situation like that, here, or probably anywhere, is to not respond straight away, to have time to think of a logical way to handle it, you know. And so that's what I did in this case. I went, oh, I'm not going to answer him right now because I might say the wrong thing. Now, what I have to do then is that the logic has to kick in. Now, if you haven't seen that old man video yet, check that out, the angry man something. I can't remember what we called that one. But I might even put a link to it underneath this if I think of it. But as with that situation, you know, you have your feelings, and quite often our feelings, it doesn't matter how logically or how how intellectually we understand the Japanese culture thing. When it comes to some of these things, our natural reaction is to say something different, you know, and to, hey, look, you know, back off, you know, back off. I'll be there when I get there, you know. But we have to logically understand. See, in his case, he owns that aeroplane. I've actually mentioned this guy before. He actually got me invited into the flying club in the first place. And so from a Japanese sort of cultural point of view, except when we're actually flying the aeroplane, he's sort of my senpai, right? He's sort of my senior guy, right? Now, I explained this with that video with the old man too, that he would see himself as senior to me because he's a few years older than me, and because he's lived in that street there for 50 years, where we've only been there for 11. So for those reasons, in Japanese culture, he would see himself as being senior to me, right? And so the point of this video is pointing out why our natural reactions and the things that we want to do or that we do in our own country or in another country are not necessarily going to be effective here. So in the case of this guy with the airplane, I had to wait and think about how I was going to answer him and get it in perspective. That's the other thing, get it in perspective, that for him, he doesn't feel he's being disrespectful to me. He feels he's just doing what his job is, his role is as the owner of the airplane and the person who's organising what we're going to do, in telling me these things that I should do. And he's not, and he actually uses English with me too. That's possibly why it's a bit harder to take, because in English it just comes across differently, right? But he sees that he's just giving me the information, and in Japanese culture that's quite common for people to tell you what to do. You should do this, you shouldn't do that, you must do this, you must do that, and they see it that they're helping you. And if you hear two Japanese people having that conversation, a Japanese person tells another Japanese person, you should do this, you shouldn't do this, don't do this, do that, the other person will thank them. Oh, thank you very much, right? Because for them it's normal. It seems what kept coming to my mind was ego. When I read that thing that guy said, you know, I wouldn't listen to him. I'd make sure that he knew that he'd have to talk to me politely, or I wouldn't listen to him, right? And what comes to mind then is ego. In some societies, we expect everybody to speak to us respectfully, right? Australian people have a bit of a thing about being spoken to equally. There's a famous story from a long time ago where there was a Prime Minister we had called Bob Hawke, and some staff member on the parliamentary, like just a dude that worked at the door, right, like a doorman, called him Bob, called him by his first name, and was reprimanded by his superiors, and it ended up going to court. The union took it to court and found that it was un-Australian to expect, un-Australian to say that a person couldn't call another person by their first name, no matter who they were, right? So it's sort of deep in Australian culture that everybody can speak to everybody as an equal, right? And that's quite common in a lot of cultures, isn't it? But it's not the way it is in Japan, right? And the point of this video is expecting that sort of stuff here. It's not going to happen. And this guy, what that guy said, and what I often get in the comments underneath the videos, is I'd tell him this, and I'd tell him that, and I'd tell him that. And I actually knew an English guy here once who used to say, I'll show him, I'll teach him how to do it. And you get these people that come here and think they're going to teach Japanese people how to behave differently. They're going to teach the people around them that they have to treat them differently and behave differently. You know, he's not going to talk to me like that. I'll teach him how to talk to me, which is sort of what that guy said in his comment. I'd teach him. I wasn't going to listen to him unless he spoke to me respectfully, right? It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And I get this all the time in comments. I've also had it with visitors here from Australia, my family and friends that have come from Australia, and you get a situation happen, and I'll go, and I'll tell them what the situation is, and they'll say, why don't you just do this? Why don't you just do that? And I sit and they'll suggest doing something that would probably be quite effective in Australia, but wouldn't work here, right? And it's the same with that old man. If I just said to that old man, no, you're not talking to me like that. When you come and talk to me politely, and I'll listen to you, and walked away, it wouldn't have helped. It would not have helped. Incidentally, I said in that video what I did do, and it has helped. What's actually been the result of that is I have had more polite responses from him and his wife since that discussion. When I've been walking past his house and greeted him, I've had much more polite greetings from him than has been the average in the past. So it worked. It did work. You know, whereas if I'd stood there and said, "You're not speaking to me like that, I'm not accepting that. When you're prepared to speak to me politely, then I'll listen to you," it wouldn't have worked. He would have gone, "What? What?" It would have made it worse. Would have made it worse. So, you know, this is the thing with the Japanese culture. You know, you've just got to accept it. You know, the guy that owns the aeroplane, I waited a while, I thought about it, and then I wrote back an email, actually reorganised my schedule a little bit so that I could be there by 8:30. Actually, I'll tell you what I really did. I asked him to extend it to 9:30, and I extended the end of the day. Basically, I made it everything easier for him so that I could be sure of when I'd be there, and we'd have more time in the period of the day to be able to do what we wanted to do. So basically, acceded to his, is that the right word? I sort of gave in to his, what he wanted, what he was trying to achieve, and thanked him very much for all the other advice that he gave me. He gave me all this advice, basically how to suck eggs, all this basic pilot stuff that we do before we fly airplanes anyway, about flight planning and stuff. And thanked him for all that, and thanks for this and thanks for that, and that's very interesting, thanks very much, right? Because that's the right answer. And the result of that, I've always responded to that guy in that way, and the result of that is that's why I'm getting invited to fly his aeroplane. That's why he suggested to that flying club that they invite me to be a member, right? And this is, again, I've mentioned this in lots of videos in the past. You wouldn't know if that didn't happen, right? In other words, if I hadn't behaved the way I've behaved with that guy, he wouldn't have invited me to go flying in his aeroplane, and I would never have known, would I, that I missed out on that opportunity. He would not have recommended to the flying club that they invite me to be a member, and I never would have known about that either, would I? And that's the point, because you get these guys all the time that will leave comments and say, "Oh, that's not true. I lived in Japan for a year, and I just did whatever I wanted to do, and I never had a problem," right? Which is often the case, because Japanese people will pretty much let you do whatever you want to do. That, you know, it's pretty rare for a Japanese person to get in your face and tell you don't do this or don't do that. They'll pretty much stand back. Pretty much. I mean, there's exceptions, like the guy going on about my mower, but there are exceptions. But generally, if you come to Japan for a year and you work at an English school somewhere and you live in an apartment building somewhere and you do your thing, you can pretty much behave however you want. And, you know, unless you really go overboard, you won't have any problems, but who knows what you're missing out on. If that company wants to employ a person to stay full-time or give them a promotion, or, you know, if there's some opportunity going, they're going to pick the person, the foreigner, who understands Japanese culture and behaves in a little bit, you know, accepting the Japanese culture and going with it in the Japanese way of doing things. More likely, they'll pick that person, you know. And so these guys that come here and behave however they want for a year, that's great, and they say, "I never had a problem," but I always wonder when they say that, how many opportunities they missed out on, you know, how many parties they weren't invited to. You know, "Hey, we're going to have a party." "Oh, it's great. Are we going to invite John?" "Oh, let's not invite John, because you know how he behaves, you know, he might embarrass us," so he doesn't get invited. Whereas if John understood Japanese culture a little bit better, it's a fictitious name, right? I'm just making it up. But if that dude understood Japanese culture a little bit better and behaved a little bit more considerately to the Japanese culture, maybe you would get invited to that party, maybe you would get offered that job, you know? It's really hard, it really is really hard, and that was sort of the point. That was a bit frustrating about that dude's comment, that was sort of the main point of that video about the old man. The point of that video was to illustrate, because first thing I did was say what I actually did in real life, and the second thing I did was I explained how I was feeling at the time. And what I did and how I was feeling were totally different things, weren't they? Because, you know, what I was feeling was I wanted to say to him, "Hey, fuck off and cut your own grass," or, you know, "mind your own business," or, you know, pick him up by the scruff of the neck, say, "Go away." I mean, that's the sort of stuff that came to my mind as I was talking to him, you know. that dude's comment actually said, oh, it seems that your two options were just to accept what the dude said or to hit him, punch him in the face. And yeah, no, that wasn't an option. As far as I was concerned, there was only one option. And that one option was just to accept what he was saying and be polite and find some sort of solution to the problem without making any more problems. Hitting him wasn't an option. I was just trying to explain, obviously that guy totally missed the point. I was trying to explain what went through me while I was talking to him. And this is what it's like living in Japan, because you've got what you intellectually understand about Japanese culture and what you feel. And as a person who hasn't grown up in Japan, as a person who lived a long time in another country first and then came here, a lot of this stuff is far from natural. You know, a lot of the stuff that we have to say and have to do is way different from what we want to say and what we do. What we want to say and what we do. Which is why the majority of foreigners that come to Japan with the intention of living here long term don't. The majority of people that come here with the intention of living long term return to their own countries within 12 months. That's a statistic, right? And it's because of stuff like this that they start to feel that they're being untrue to themselves because they can't say and do what they really feel they want to say and do. And ego, that's another one. It's a big part of it. You've just got to, sometimes, you've got to remind yourself of what your goal is, what you're trying to achieve. You know, and sometimes that does mean sucking up your ego. And there's a lot of people can't deal with that. We get that on these videos all the time. I wouldn't accept that. I wouldn't let that person talk to me like that. I'd say what I want to say. I'd do what I want to do. And of course you can. You can, but you're living in another culture. It's a different game. You know, the whole reason that we've managed to make so many videos about Japan is because it's so different from everywhere else. You know, there's so few places like this. You know, it's a different game. It's a different set of rules. And you can come here and go, oh, I'm not playing by their rules, I'm going to do it my way. Well, you can if you want to, right? But it's been my experience that doesn't get good results. It rarely gets a good result. You're much better off understanding how the game is played and playing it that way. And you'll get better results. I'm going flying in an aeroplane tomorrow for free, right? I'm flying an aeroplane for about an hour and a half tomorrow. Nagoya to Shizuoka, the video's coming. I'm doing it for free because this guy finds me an acceptable person to hang out with and to fly his aeroplane, you know? And if I'd sent back that email today that first came to my mind, yeah, mate, I gotcha. I'll do my best to be there by 8:30. Back off. You know, I wouldn't be going flying tomorrow, would I? You know? And it's... I don't know, to be honest with you, I've found, as an old man, I've found over time that ego gets in the way of good behaviour quite often. And I mean, the internet's full of it. How often do you see on the internet two dudes whose egos are struggling with each other and they end up in some big fight or something? And sometimes it's just arguing or confrontation or road rage or something, or sometimes it's actually physical violence. And most of the time it's ego. You know, I mean, just touching just briefly, some of you guys have seen some videos I've made about Aikido, and that helps deal with that too. Ego really gets in the way of our interactions with other people, you know, and in a lot of our cultures, it's that I'm number one, look after number one, you got to look after number one, got to look after yourself, me. That's deep in us, in a lot of our cultures, you know, and it's not the case here. It's not the case here, and that's often a big problem here, is that, you know, people come here and I'm got to look after number one, I'm going to look after me, right? And it doesn't work here. And if you give off that vibe, it really doesn't work here. The way they see that as being childish, that's how children behave. So if you behave like that here, they'll see you as being childish. Which means if I'd said to the old guy next door, you come back and talk to me when you're going to talk to me with respect, right? And it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked. It would have made more of a problem. So the smart people who can't deal with this and hear this in a video will often leave a comment and say, I couldn't live with that. You know, I don't think I want to live in Japan. I think I'll just come for a visit. That's smart. If you recognize that you can't live with like this, and so you go, no, all right, then I can't live like that, so I'm only going to visit Japan for a holiday, I don't think I can live there. That's smart. That's recognizing, you know, your boundaries and what you're comfortable with and what you're not, you know. And because other people, that's smart, other people interpret it totally differently and going, you're weak, you should stand up for yourself. You know, I wouldn't let, that guy actually said something about, I wouldn't let someone treat my children without respect. And actually, what I teach my children is how to be polite to other people and how to be patient with dickheads, basically, because every country has dickheads. You're not going to change them. You know, this goes for Japan and it goes for everywhere else, really, doesn't it? You know, telling off that guy and I'm going to tell him and I'm going to teach him. No, it's not. No, you're not. That old guy next door to us is a bit of a dickhead. He really is, right? And life's full of them, isn't it? We just have to learn how to deal with them. And that's what I'm teaching my kids, how to be polite to people and how to deal with dickheads. You know? And ego, okay, so a certain amount of ego and confidence is important. You know, and we can maintain that. If you've got a decent amount of confidence and a healthy ego, you can deal with accepting a bit of rudeness and abuse now and again without getting upset. I think getting upset at other people's rudeness, it just shows weakness. So, sort of drifting off the topic a little bit, the main topic was really supposed to be that the rules in Japan are different and the game in Japan is different. And you've got to remember that. You've got to play by the way they play it and see it the way they see it. You know, that pilot guy, the aeroplane owning guy, he doesn't see that as he's being rude to me. He just sees it as he's conveying this information. You've got to do this and you've got to do that and you should do this, you should do this and you should do that. And he's not sort of he's not worrying about my ego. He's just giving me that information. That's really common here. People do that a lot. Don't do that. You know, they'll give you that sort of thing all the time here. And you just got to accept it. And if you haven't got the strength and you haven't got the confidence and the strength and the inner peace to deal with it, then it's probably not the place for you, you know? And I mean, this is different. If you're only coming for a holiday for a week or two, it doesn't really matter. I mean, this is really talking about people that are here for a longer term, you know? They're here for a year or 2 or 10 or 20. This is more relevant, you know? So anyway, hopefully someone got something out of that. No doubt we'll be repeating all this. I've been repeating the same stuff for 12 years because it doesn't matter how often you repeat it. People will watch a video like this and at the end of it, say you shouldn't say that, you should say this, you should do this, you should stand up for yourself, you should do this. They'll totally miss everything. Just lost our small camera, guys. So that's basically it anyway, right? So, yeah, hopefully someone got something out of it. More videos coming soon.